Hi, everybody. This is Robert Linkle, and thank you for joining us today on Aging with Strength. This is episode number 8, and it is titled Lower Back Injuries and Strategies to Assist You in Preventing Those from Occurring. And I've got a lot of statistics for you and some personal experiences I want to share with you as well as we go through this. Lower back pain is something that has been in my life for a very long time, along with my brother, my parents, the majority of my family, and a very large majority of my clientele have all experienced lower back injuries and lower back pain that is what we call chronic. So today's episode, we will discuss what these injuries are, what they can be, some of the things that we can do to assist in preventing them from occurring, and then also, if they do occur, some exercises you could do to maybe assist you in getting it better, or at least to bring some kind of comfort to you as far as some of the issues go. Just a reminder that obviously I'm not a physical therapist or a doctor. I will talk to you from my kinesiology and master's degree that I have, along with my personal training experience and then my personal experience. So I'm not prescribing or suggesting that you should do all these things. I'm just going to give you some ideas of some things that may be beneficial, help you get a little bit stronger, but be sure to consult your doctor, your physical therapist before you do any of these, okay? All right, so this is from, these statistics are from the National Institute of Neurological Disease and Stroke. Their initials are NIH, and you can check out their website at www.nationalinstituteofneurologicaldiseaseandstroke.com. So the big one that comes out that they start with right from the get-go, and this is up to date from this year, is that 80% of adults will experience lower back pain at some point in their life. It was pretty much right down the middle between men and women, and typically the majority of them experience this between 30 and 50 years of age, and that's kind of their first encounter, their first interaction with this lower back pain or lower back injuries. And majority of experiences will come from some type of lifting or some kind of athletic movement that they perform that their body's either not prepared to be in, like in a car accident. You're not prepared for that as it comes, if you get rear-ended or you're T-boned or whatnot, or if you were preparing to pick something up. Namely, the one that came up a lot was working with children or anticipating movement of a child. When you prepare and you see a kid coming at you, you're ready for it. But if you're stopping your kid from falling down, or they jump and you try to catch them or something like that, those were some pretty common injuries that people had listed on there. So acute pain is considered anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks. Anything less than 4 just kind of meant you had a little tweak to your back and then things were better. But acute pain is 4 to 12 weeks. And then they consider chronic lower back pain as 12 weeks or more. My first injury with my lower back pain was in 8th grade. So I was 13, and I was a hammer throw. Well, I was a discus and a shot putter back in middle school. They didn't have the hammer throw until we got into college. But being a thrower and trying to build the strength levels needed to move to the high school level and to impress our coaches and such, when we got there, we all would lift on our own. And I played football as well. So we had seniors that would come down, juniors or seniors that would come down to the elementary or to the middle school, and they would bring us. So we had an elementary school and the high school were right next to each other, and the middle school was a little bit further away. So the seniors and the juniors would come over, and they'd worked it out with the school where they would pick us up and bring us back to the high school and then lift with us. And they would teach us, quote unquote. So I got in there and I'm learning how to squat and how to bench and do deadlifts and such. And I was pretty strong. I was already a pretty strong kid. At 13 years old, I already had a 315 pound deadlift, and was back squatting to 205, somewhere in there. I was about 180 pounds, so wasn't super strong, but I was decent. And when you lift with seniors and juniors and these guys that you look up to and they're kind of your heroes, you tend to push things to try to keep up or try to show them that you have this potential. So I'm attempting to perform deadlifts that are beyond me. We call that hope lifting. You're like, I hope I can lift this. And so I had, I don't know, 405 or something like that on the bar, and was attempting to do a deadlift with this. And I could feel my back rounding, and I was heavy on my toes, and my head was all kinked up, and I was doing anything and everything I could to move this bar, and it didn't budge. But I definitely felt my back, become injured in some way to where it bothered me for the next couple of weeks. And then, when you're in that environment, you don't take time off. So we were back at it the next day or two, and I was back squatting and doing split squats and whatever else we were doing. And so it just, kind of continued to build. As I got into throwing further and then moved into the high school, it just kind of kept happening over and over again. And not really knowing any better in the way that, we learned then, this was, the mid 90s. We didn't have a lot of internet access. So I had these videos of John Powell and Mac Wilkins and Jay Silvestri and just, Wolfgang and a lot of these guys that were great. Ben Plunknet, a lot of these guys, Dan Johns, that were great throwers. And I had videos of them. So, John Godino always threw with a belt on when he was in college at UCLA. And so I wanted to do that. And Andy Bloom, when he was throwing at Wake Forest, he wore a belt. So I thought, okay, I'll put this belt on while I'm going. And I remember at a very young age, relying on that weight belt to assist me. And so we see this, the reason I'm telling you the story is that these injuries occur at a young age and they continue to build, but we do a lot of things to assist ourselves, or what we think is assisting ourselves with an injury, with a lower back pain, whatever it might be. That again is kind of that common practice phase that phrase that I like to use. This is what our industry suggests. This is what common practice is out there. This people suggest you rest and you ice and you compress and you elevate and you wear a brace and you take time off and you relax. And we're learning that when injuries occur, that a lot of that we originally thought was correct is not so correct. That compression and elevation is a pretty good one, but movement is very good. That ice is great for the first couple of days, 24 to 72 hours. And then beyond that, it's not really doing a ton. So to rest and lay down and just ice it and not move it much, is not as beneficial as wrapping things, icing in the beginning, but working on elevation, working on increasing blood flow, and then removing that out of the area to help reduce swelling and so on. So we did a lot of things back in the day there where I was just, this is what I saw, so I copied that. And unfortunately, it left me with, pretty severe lower back injuries to the point where I started getting sciatic pains all the way down my left leg, all the way down into my, my calf on the side was getting, basically becoming numb and tingling all the way down into my toes. And so getting into college and throwing at Sac State, when I was there, I just put on multiple back braces to help me support, even though in many cases putting the brace on made my sciatic symptoms worse. I still felt like it gave me enough support to be able to keep throwing. So through lifting and everything else that I did, I just bit my lip and I went through it. And I took a lot of pain medications. I was on Vioxx was the one that our school actually provided for us. So I took a lot of that is no longer on the market. So it was giving a lot of people some health issues. I took Tylenol constantly. I mean, I just took whatever I could. I was putting BioFreeze on my body and doing everything that I could to fix these injuries or maintain. And really the big problem was, the structure from the inside had been damaged. And from all these years of repetitive movement over and over and over again, the imbalance had now been created. And this is really the big issue that we see with the majority of lower back injuries, where they come from. Okay. These are injuries that, I got a gal that I work with who works at a grocery store, and at the grocery, she worked checker for a while. And you have one, the right hand that, that enters in the keys, and the other one scans the item and goes. And so her left arm would reach and rotate and reach and rotate, and her right side and her right hand wouldn't really move at all. And she did this for years. So for years of repeating the same motion, the same, development, even though it's nothing major, she's moving, half pound to maybe 5 or 6 pound items. It's enough repetition over and over again under some loads, but just perform thousands of times, that creates this imbalance. And when you look at, musculatures in the body, typically with lower back injuries, you'll see one side of the erector muscles going up the spine that's, drastically bigger than the other one, or one that's severely underdeveloped compared to the others. So a really great example I like to give it as, if you imagine, like, think of, Tom Cruise Mission Impossible, when he's suspended from, the belt or the rope or whatever that is, and he's suspended there. Imagine that each part of his body, arms and legs and knees, everything, were all suspended by an independent rope. So let's say, 6 or 8 ropes are lowering him down into there, and they're all supposed to be, taking up their percentage of load. Well, when one part of the body is overdeveloped, it means that it's doing more than it's supposed to, and that the others are not pulling their weight. And so imagine one of those strings or one of those ropes is now taking more of the load, and the other ones are actually getting on slack or just not developing as much. And so this one's getting overly stressed, and the other ones are getting underdeveloped or not used at all. And in that case, a lot of the injuries start to occur. So we start to see sprains. A sprain is a overstretch or a tear of a ligament. We'll start to see strains. A strain is an overstretch or a tear of a muscle. You'll start to see degeneration of discs. So you have vertebrae that are the bony material, especially L1 through L5, and then going down to the S's and the sacrals down into the hips or into the pelvis. You'll start to see the discs in between them, which are like the jelly type. My doctor called it like crab meat. It's like a jelly donut with crab meat stuffed in it. Those are in between the bones. And so you get degeneration of this from overdeveloped musculature, but also improper movement of rounding the back, curving the back, loading the back improperly, and not having things kind of stacked up where they want. And so you get degeneration of the discs in between. They start to pack, they start to wear, and then eventually it leads to a bulge or herniation. That's what I had, L5, S1, basically the last disc between my last vertebrae and my pelvis, my hip, the hip bones, my pelvis, that basically compressed and contracted, and then anteriorly rotated and squished the crab meat out into the nervous system, the spinal cord running through the center, and it pushed out, drove pretty hard onto the sciatic nerve, and that nerve is what was shooting all the way down my leg. And this just occurred over and over and over again, and so many violent times as it bulged. Eventually, I've told the story about how I was back squatting and I felt it blow apart, and that was the end of it. So I had to have surgery to repair that. But it was from thousands, maybe even a million rotations in the exact same direction, just over and over again. And this occurs with everybody. When you're carrying your grocery bags, when you're carrying your purse, when you're carrying your briefcase, if you travel a lot, which side you hold, your roller bag on, when you put your purse on, which you put it from left to right over this one side. Well, the musculature on the other side is what's holding that. And so we have these reoccurring movements that we do, reoccurring loads that we put on our body that creates those imbalances. And so now you have, independent spider webs, independent straps that are now holding, that are doing more than they're supposed to. The other ones aren't doing as much. One is really hypermobile, one is overly tight. And so injury is just waiting to occur. You got something that's cinched up, really pressured and tight, and the other side is loose and relaxed, and we're waiting for anything. An improper lift, a child jumps on your back, you sneeze violently, you bend over to pick up dryer lint sheets. That's one of the big ones for me. Picking up a bounce sheet off the ground. I've thrown my back out 2 or 3 times doing that. I've had one with pillows. I've had with, picking up my 18-month-old. I mean, it doesn't have to be this big heavy load or something that you're doing that's athletic and dynamic, and it can be in any little position you do this. So some of the things that people will suggest, chiropractic is a big one that I hear, and I personally am not a fan of chiropractors in the practice of adjusting. Chiropractors in general, I think, for the most part, it's a good profession, but the adjustments are where I start to have issues at. Is the best way I can describe it is a Rubik's Cube. Okay. You remember this from the 80s. Hopefully most of you do. Rubik's Cube, you're trying to rotate this box, this cube, to get all the colors to match on one side. And when you first get that Rubik's Cube, it's really hard to move. It's tough to manipulate. And as you continue to play and mess with it over, a couple of months and you continue working, it starts moving really smooth and really easy. And then once you use it for a long time, pieces just start falling out. And I think of the back this way, especially L1 to L5. I personally feel like there's not supposed to be play in the bony structure of that. That's not supposed to be hypermobile. It's not supposed to be mobile really at all. The musculature around it is supposed to be mobile. It's supposed to be what helps us rotate and move about. So when you're continually, which I did for years, I had adjustments where anytime something would get out of place or was causing pain, I would go in, I get cracked, it would readjust, and I would feel relief. But the problem is, just like the Rubik's Cube, the more that I messed with it, the more loose it became. And so the injury, I wasn't fixing the problem. I continued to just try to Band-Aid the symptom. And it would fix and I would feel better. And then it would be, a week before I needed another adjustment. Then it became 5 days, and then it became 3 days. And I'd be going almost every day to get adjusted because things just started falling out. Like it was just so loose, so hypermobile, the injury just kept occurring. But what I didn't address was the musculature imbalance that was causing that to slip and to keep occurring. And so that's where the physical therapy component comes in to, the strength training component comes in to see these imbalances and to start to work on them, especially unilaterally. And that's why we do so much of that, at our studio with our clients. We work so independent on unilateral development from side to side rather than so much bilateral movements. We know that bilateral training is probably one of the more specific but most efficient ways to build a good amount of strength or to put on muscular size pretty quickly. And that's why you see it in the bench press and the deadlift and the back squat and the hip thrust and the main lifts. Yes, Brett, I do believe that is a main lift. And so that's why we see that. But if there's an imbalance that already exists there, we're going to continue bilaterally to dominate with our stronger side. So we want to take a couple steps back, start to work on things unilaterally. It means one side at a time, one implement one side at a time, and to start to develop the strength where hopefully if one side of your back, I'm just guessing, is 60% dominant and the other side is, 40%, that eventually we start over months or even years of training to even it up to 50-50. Okay. Strength doesn't always coordinate to coordination. It doesn't always mean if I'm stronger on one side, I'm more coordinated on that side. That's not usually the case. Typically, you're more coordinated on one side and stronger on the other. But we think our right arm is our arm that we right or throw with. That's my stronger arm. Usually not. The other side is usually stronger. That's the block side. That's the loaded carry side. So we see these balances and we think, we should be pretty even. We not necessarily. So as you continue to increase strength to try to even that up on both sides, a lot of times working unilaterally, you're building and increasing the coordination on either side. So we actually get pretty coordinated and pretty strong and pretty mobile and, pretty well endured musculature wise on each side. And we start to balance the body out pretty well and develop a pretty healthy body. And then at that point, ideally, if you wanted to do bilateral lifting, we're now ready to start to develop that strength and to move up. So these strategies or these theories, these are my thoughts on, how I feel someone can go about seeing some of the issues they might have to start to address them. In many cases, if you were to come in and work with me, I'd have to send you to Dan, our physical therapist, to have him help me break down what the issue is. Once we know that, then we can address it. So in many cases, you need to start in that space. But sometimes I can take a look at you or your therapist or your trainer or whoever it is you're going in to see. They'll be able to kind of take a look at you and say, here's what I see going on, and just give you some direction on what to do to fix you. So as far as exercises go, so I don't know if how many of you are AARP members, but this is the article that was just in an AARP magazine. And this guy, I think his name is Michael Zimmer. I find that up on there. So he's the one, he interviewed me for this, and it was just, what are 4 exercises people can do to take care of their hips? Well, it could have been the same, what would you do to take care of your back? It could have been the exact same title. And basically, these exercises are just very simple ones you can do at home, some basic little bands, just body weight, good morning, a typical hinge here. I thought that photo and the images they used here are very good. The glute bridge, here at the bottom, I like to do a band in between so you get a little more abduction activation. Standing adduction, band between, pulling apart, and then anchoring the band. onto a couch or post or whatnot you have in the house. Just those 4 basic exercises. I love doing bridges. If you learn how to bridge correctly, it's a huge difference, especially in lower back strength and stability, helping your posture and such, just working the backside of your body. These are 4 basic exercises that you can start with. Working into the gym, I suggest 70-80% of your training be posterior dominant. So focused on the backside of your body, which typically you can look at and say, anytime my body is hinging, that's posterior dominant. Anytime I'm pulling weight, that's posterior dominant. So I like to look at least 60%, if not more. Majority of our clients, they train upwards of 80% on the backside of their body. And it doesn't mean we're neglecting the other areas. We just don't address them as much. We've had years of anterior dominance that our bodies are accustomed to and used to. And so for, 2 or 3 hours a week, I can address pretty much the backside of their body in a full body core approach to develop the musculature to help fight that. Out of 168 hours, if I get 2 or 3, I'm going to work that to the best of its ability every single time I'm in there with my clients. So those are some basic things you can look at, some basic exercises you can start to do. Symptoms that we talked about with the lower back, anywhere from strains to sprains to, compressions, herniations, bulges, those coming through, sciatic pain running down your leg, long-term lower back ache and such. These are all issues too. We didn't even talk about, middle thoracic spine or up towards the cervical, the posterior aspect of the neck. I mean, any of those areas, these are all different talks that we could go on to address those. So specifically, we're looking at, the lower back, L1 through L5, and then into the hips. This is such a overused and it's an aggressive component of our body. What I mean by aggressive is we use it for every single thing. So every day it's triggered and it's used a ton, and it's involved in everything. Everything originates from that moment. That is your center of mass. So anything and everything that you're trying to do, this is where it's all starting from. And this is why it's such an issue for us to develop strength and develop even, musculature in that area to help you in your long-term quest to keep your back healthy and to be able to get more athletic. We hear some screaming going on out there. I think the little one's awake and having a fit. So hopefully this will assist you and help you a little bit. Nothing against any of the other practices that are out there. I'm just giving you my experience and my personal thoughts. I know there are chiropractors out there that aren't always adjusting and cracking people. They're working with people and they're therapists as well. And they're doing the part to help you get there. Totally cool with that. My big issue is, jumping right to the adjustments where you're just cracking people trying to end their issue, their pain, and fix the symptom, and not necessarily looking back at the root of the injury. And then, everybody is different. There are some people like myself where I was in such bad pain that the adjustment was the only thing that would relieve it for me. I just wish I would have had direction beyond that to help me fix this rather than just signing up for more visits to get adjusted. So lower back pain is very real. If you haven't experienced it, number one, I hope that you don't. I hope you definitely take a look at, your body and how it's built and make sure you're taking really good precautions. But number two, you've probably, been around or are around people that are experiencing it. Feel free to share this webcast with them. Hopefully it'll give them a little bit of direction, a little insight on how they can fix some of their issues. A really simple little survey that I did, it was during 1 hour of a training session with my clients. I just, without them knowing, I counted how many times I saw someone bend over, rounding their back to pick things up and put them down as opposed to hinging. And I estimated that it would take an extra second for every hinge for the individual to put their body in the right position rather than just bending over quickly. And we averaged like 38 bend overs an hour, something along those lines. I mean, it was crazy amounts of bend overs for our clients. And this was with load and without load. And eventually I got to a point where I was just telling them, and I'm like, I have to say something. I don't want to sacrifice, but I needed some kind of statistical, support to show that, is this just me like nitpicking on how I bend over or how I hinge to pick up things, or is this really a big issue? And it was massive, the massive amounts of how many times we bend over. And even though you're not loaded in some cases, it's still a bend over. I think of the back as a copper wire. And it's a wire that'll bend, and you can remold it and bend and remold it. And eventually, without showing a lot of wear and tear, you're going to bend it one time and it's going to snap. And it doesn't have to be under a lot of load or a lot of pressure or in a really awkward position to do that. It's years and years and years of bending incorrectly. It's all going to add up. And this is the long-term approach to our back. If we don't take care of this, it's going to break. If you're not using it correctly, you're going to lose it. So hopefully this helps out. Please feel free to share it. We really appreciate you all for being on with us today. This is Aging with Strength, episode number 8, lower back issues and strategies to help you fix it. Check out that AARP magazine article if you can, Healthy Hips. It's online as well if you don't have a hard copy, or if you want to email or text me, I'd be happy to send it to you. robertlinkle@gmail.com and 916-955-1586. Have a great day. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time.